Hello everyone, this is Kat again, and we're going to continue with our blocks on the outside of our Getting to Know You Block of the Month quilt. So today we're going to be working on block 4. This is our yellow-green block, and I have all of my pieces cut per the directions. Notice that the first thing we're going to do is take one of our background squares and one of our green weave blocks. I believe these are the 3-inch. We're going to stack them right sides together, draw a diagonal line from corner to corner. We're going to do the same thing with this dark olive square. So I'm going to get the camera set up over here and show you how I string piece all these together to make it nice and quick. As you can see here at the machine, I've already sewn a nice string here, but I'm not done. So I'm going to continue on. I'm going to show you how I do this pretty efficiently but accurately. So I've just drawn one line down the center. Some of you may want to draw those 2 1/4-inch lines from the center and sew down those lines, but I use my machine to do this so I don't have to mark all those lines. So as I'm string piecing, I finish the last piece, and what I'm going to do is I have already moved my needle over so that when I line up the left side of my foot on my diagonal line, my needle is positioned 1/4 of an inch to the right of my center line. And I'm not using a 1/4-inch piecing foot because a lot of them have a flange on them and they have a tendency to push your fabric. And notice I'm not using any pins either. So if you have a machine with a really good feeding system like this one, you don't need to pin. Of course you can if you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this next square that's marked on the diagonal up into position until the needle hits the edge and the left side of my foot is lined up with my line. And then I'm going to just start to sew. When I get to the end, I'm just going to pull that out a little bit, give myself a little more wiggle room. I'm going to bring the next unit in. I'm going to slide it in until the needle touches that edge, and then I'm going to start to sew. Now when I get done with this entire line of blocks, all I'm going to do is grab my string, pull it around, and I'm going to sew down the other side, and my machine's all set up. So I'm going to finish doing that, get them all cut and pressed, and I'll meet you right back here. Okay, I got my half square triangle units together here with my 2 different greens, and she tells us to press the seam allowance to the dark side. So on the dark olive, I've got the seam allowance going towards the olive fabric, but remember, value's relative. So on the lighter green weave fabric, I have my seam allowance going towards my background fabric. The next step is to create our triangle corner units, and basically this is just a 4-patch. So we're going to take one of these half square triangles for the upper left corner, 2 of these oriented in the same way with our background up and to the left, and then one of our green weave squares down here in the right hand corner. So we're going to sew the 2 in the left column together, the 2 in the right column together, and then she tells us which direction to press our seam allowances. So on this one, our seam allowance is going to be pressed towards our upper left block, and this patch is going to be pressed towards the solid green weave square. So I'm going to go ahead and strip piece all of these units, a stack of these units and a stack of these units, get them all pressed, and then come back and we'll be ready to sew the 4-patch together. Here are my triangle corner units completed. So when you sew your 2 columns together, it doesn't really matter which direction the seam allowance goes. So take your pick. But I've never been a fan of pressing seams open, but I think on these I am going to come back and I'm going to press this last seam open because there's quite a lot of bulk in here. Just word of caution, I would press it to one side first and then come back and press it open. You're going to get a straighter seam on the right side, which is what you want. And also I want to remind you to get this perfect piecing here in the center. And I think I went over this in a previous block, but you're going to nest your seam allowances here when you're sewing these 2 units together. And I always put a pin in just above that intersection. So when I start to sew down from the top through this intersection, I'm going to have it pinned so that nothing can slip here. Just remember, you can't pull this pin until after you've sewn through it. So go slow and make sure you're using these really super fine pins. They're quilting pins. They're the only pins that I will sew over with my machine, and you don't take any chance of damaging your machine because the pin will bend if you hit it and it won't hurt your machine. So there again, make sure you pin that intersection so you get this really nice diagonal line here, and then go back and press that open if you want. Now we're going to look at our fast flying geese. So this is the first step of making our fast flying geese units. So we're going to take one of our large squares, one of our large olive squares, large olive flowers, and we're going to take 2 of our background squares, and you're just going to place these right sides together in each corner diagonally. Doesn't matter which one. You're going to draw a diagonal line through the center of the smaller squares that you've placed on top, and notice I am going to put some pins in here because I don't want these to shift at all. I want to make sure that all of my raw edges are even and stay nice and tidy. I'm going to place a pin in each square, and then I want one where they overlap. Now remember, we are not going to sew on this line, but we're going to sew to the left and to the right, 1/4 of an inch. So again, I'm going to take my 1/4 of an inch foot off and put my regular foot on, move my needle, and I'm going to sew on either side of this line. I'm going to go ahead and get all of these units because we need to complete, I believe, 4 of these, and then 4 with our dark olive background as well. So I will be back to show you the second step. So here's what the first part of this unit is going to look like. This is the first part of our fast flying geese unit. So I've cut them apart, and now I'm getting ready to place my next bee unit of our background on top of the first half that we created, And now I'm going to draw a diagonal line through here and so on either side. So just so you can see up close what this is going to look like. You really don't have, you've got the raw edges right here at the corner, and that's okay, that's correct, because we're actually going to come in here now on either side of that V and sew down. So you're going to end up with that perfect 1/4 of an inch once we get this pieced and these cut apart. This is half of your flying geese unit right here. So if you fold it in half, this is what half of it looks like. So I'm going to put that last square on here, and I'll be right back. So here is what it looks like after I've sewn down a 1/4 of an inch on either side of the center line. And again, I kept 2 pins in there. And then before you cut this apart, go to the iron and press it flat, because we're working with some bias here. And your piece has a tendency to get a little wonky. So press it before you cut it apart, and it'll keep everything nice and square. So here is my unit after I've cut it in half and pressed my last triangle on. You've got some bias here, so be real careful when you press this. But I wanted to show you when you use this method, I love this method because you've got a perfectly straight line right here, which is always the tough thing when you're trying to make flying geese units not using this method. And this unit is supposed to finish 2.5 by 4.5. So I did 1 to test to see if my unit was going to come out correct, or if I was going to have to make any adjustments. And I'm happy to report that it came out exactly 2.5 by 4.5 inches. This unit right here, I've just clipped my dog ears off, and it is a beautiful flying geese unit. So I'm going to continue and make the other 3, actually the other 2 for this, and then I'm going to make the other 4 using the dark olive and the other green. I'll be back. Okay, so here are our 2 flying geese units sewn together. They make a cool V. And I decided on this block as well to press that center seam open. Just makes everything lie a lot smoother here in this area. So now we have all of our units pieced, and we're ready to put our block together. So here is what it looks like, and I've really enjoyed putting this block together. It's gone together very easily. Everything's come out the right size, and I'm really happy with it. So we are going to now sew our block together in 3 columns, and I will tell you which way to, well, I'll refer to the book and tell you which way she recommends we press our seam allowances here in just a second. But I'm going to go ahead and put my 3 columns together for you, and then I'll be back to show you which way we're going to press those. Okay, we're on the final stretch. We're ready to sew our block frame A and block frame B's on. But first, I want to go back to what I said about putting all of our pieces together for the center of our block. And I said I was going to sew my columns together. The book says sew rows, but remember this block is symmetrical. So if I turn it this way, then I just sewed rows. So it doesn't really matter. Just wanted to clarify that in case some of you got confused. What she does say is press the seam allowances for our center row or column toward our center square, and because you're pressing these towards the center, you're going to press these out so that you have alternating seam allowances here to help you line up. Okay? So the next thing is I'm going to sew block frame A to the top and bottom, or sides if you have it rotated the other way, and trim it down, and then put our last two borders on. So I'm going to put those on. I'll be right back. Okay, there you have it. Block 4 finished. I have the other one right there that I have to complete, but I have one. Notice that I haven't yet trimmed my last two border frames yet, but I'm not going to until I get ready to trim the entire block up. And remember, there's a separate video for that. So bye for now. Happy quilting. Hope you're enjoying this block of the month. I know I am, and I'm going to be coming right back here with block 5 shortly. See you then. Bye-bye.